Today we're going to do a deep dive into understanding payloads and how they work within the context of a penetration test. We will first examine the architecture and complex structure of a payload, and then we'll create a couple working payloads so you can test in your own penetration testing lab. There's a lot to cover, so let's get right into it. Welcome back to the channel. As I mentioned, we have two tasks ahead of us today. The first is to do a deep dive into the architecture and structure of a payload so that you can understand the mechanics behind them. The second is to do a practical exercise of creating your own so that you can test them in your own penetration testing lab. In my previous videos on Metasploit payloads, we talked about how to select the correct one within the Metasploit framework. MSFvenom allows us to create payloads outside of that constraint for entirely different purposes. When we think of performing a professional penetration test remotely, we should think of the Metasploit framework. But when we think of a physical pen test or social engineering where we have access to systems and people, we should think about using MSFvenom. The reason for this is how we actually deliver the payload. When we use the Metasploit framework, we are using network protocols to transfer our exploit, which then delivers a payload. But with social engineering and physical pen tests, we don't have a delivery mechanism other than our own wits. The power of MSFvenom actually lies in its versatility. Whether you're targeting Windows, Linux, Android, or any other platform, MSFvenom has a payload for it. It supports a multitude of payloads, ensuring that you can tailor your approach to your specific scenario at hand. The disadvantage to all this is we need to know in advance what type of payload we need, what type of system we plan on attacking, and then obviously we need to have connectivity for a reverse shell or a bind shell. So let's start our conversation by focusing on the architecture of shellcode generated by MSFvenom. So first, let's define what shellcode is in the context of MSFvenom. So shellcode essentially is just a set of instructions injected and executed on a target machine as a result of an exploit. An essential requirement within the shellcode is its compactness and efficiency, which is designed to perform specific tasks like opening a back door or gaining unauthorized access. The architecture of MSFvenom generated shellcode is actually multi-layered. At its core, the shellcode is written in assembly language, ensuring that it is as lightweight and direct as possible. This is crucial because the shellcode actually has to occupy a minimal space within the exploit payload and then also execute quickly. We may not be given a lot of space on the system in order to inject the payload. So let's go over some additional definitions. So let's start with the stub. A stub is just simply a small piece of code used as part of the payloads, particularly in shellcode. Its primary purpose is to prepare the environment for the actual main payload to execute. This can involve locating certain functions or libraries in the system's memory. In a payload, the stub is actually responsible for finding the base address of a system DLL, resolving the API function addresses, or decoding the rest of the payload if it's encoded. It basically just ensures that the payload can run correctly, regardless of the specific environment of the target machine. So now let's talk about a payload. So a payload in MSFvenom refers to the part of the code or data that actually performs the intended action on the target system. Once delivered to the target system, the payload executes to perform its designated task. This could be establishing a connection back to the attacker in a reverse shell scenario, executing commands, or compromising data. Encoding. It may or may not be required, but it's something I want to quickly cover. In some cases, especially to avoid detection by antivirus software or intrusion detection systems, the payload might need to be encoded, which simply means that we're just changing enough of the code so that it doesn't actually match malware signatures. And then lastly, I want to talk about a listener. So a listener is just a module or service that actually is waiting for an incoming connection from payloads. It's essentially the other end of the line, ready to receive and respond to the payload once it's set up on the target system. So a listener can be on our system or it can be on the victim system, depending on if we're creating a bind shell or a reverse shell. I talked about the differences between a bind shell and a reverse shell in a previous video on Metasploit, so I'm not going to rehash that information, but if you do need to understand the differences, make sure you check out the video listed above. So now that we got some definitions out of the way, let's talk about the actual steps within a successful payload execution. So during the payload delivery and execution, an exploit is used to deliver the payload to the target system. The exploit takes advantage of a vulnerability to inject the payload into that system. As mentioned earlier, when performing a professional penetration test against network systems, this is usually performed by using network protocols to communicate with that victim system. But if we perform a social engineering exercise, we actually have to deliver that payload in a different way. It could be through an email attachment, for example. And if we're performing a physical pen test, we may have the payload on a USB stick that we put into our target systems. So the next step is stub initialization. So when the payload is actually executed, that's when the stub part of the payload first runs. So again, its job is to set the stage for the main payload. This can include dynamic resolution of APIs, again, or decoding the payload, again, if it's encoded. So the next step is the main payload operation. So after the stub has performed its initial tasks, the main part of the payload is actually executed. This part could create a reverse shell, execute commands, again, or perform other malicious activities. So when that's done, then we have the listener engagement. Again, for payloads like reverse shell, the payload attempts to connect back to the attacker's machine. In that case, the listener is set up in advance by the attacker and just accepts any connection. So this basically just establishes a channel through which the attacker can control the target system and then exfiltrate data. The next step is called continued interaction, where the listener and the payload just continue to interact as long as the connection is maintained. It's during this phase that the attacker can send commands through the listener, which are executed by the payload on the target system, and then also it receives outputs or data back. It's basically just back and forth communication during this time. However, if a system is rebooted, this connection will drop. We will talk about command and control in other videos, but once we gain access to a remote system, we got to go through a lot of work to make sure that we have a way to reconnect, even if our initial listener engagement is severed. So in summary, this is the basis of how many cyber attacks actually are structured and used by professional penetration testers. So let's actually go into an example of how this works. So we're not going to create one yet. I just want to walk through it and show you that MSFvenom allows for various payload options that are each designated for specific target environments and for their objectives. So for example, we can create a Windows reverse TCP shell payload using the following command. The assembly code of a payload handles multiple tasks. Because this payload targets a Windows system, it will start with a stub to find the base address of a kernel32.dll library, basically which is used for API call resolutions. So the reason why we do this is because it actually is a way of maintaining stealth and avoiding the need to hard code addresses in our code, which can easily be flagged by security systems. So once the base address is located, the shellcode actually dynamically resolves necessary API calls like create process, socket, connect, and more. Now it does this in a way to avoid string-based detection. This process is basically just in-memory bootstrapping of necessary functions to establish control. So error handling is another critical aspect. The shellcode involves routines that should gracefully handle failures, ensuring that the payload doesn't crash the target process. Now that's a fingers crossed. The stability is paramount in maintaining stealth and effectiveness on a system, but we also have to be very careful about not bringing that system down. The final part of the shellcode often includes instructions to inject and execute additional software into memory that we might want to use. The most common is the Meterpreter payload, which is a tool for post-exploitation command and control. Again, Meterpreter runs itself entirely in the memory of the host, leaving minimal traces and providing extensive control over that target system. Again, although we won't be actually discussing encoding in this video, I want you to understand a little bit more about its function. So again, encoding is simply a method for obfuscating the shellcode. This code is vital for evading antivirus detections, and there are a few different options that you have available for it. In short, the MSFvenom command encodes the payload multiple times, altering its signature to bypass security defenses. Your biggest headache and the deepest rabbit hole you'll ever go down when working with payloads is encoding and antivirus evasion. However, if this is your dream job to be on a red team, encoding will become your obsession. Just giving you fair warning. So that's a summary of the architecture of MSFvenom generated shellcode. A lot of research and development time has been put into MSFvenom, which has created a lot of different payloads for different systems and applications. Basically, if there's an operating system and a CPU, there's probably a payload for it. Now that we understand the architecture of a payload at a fundamental level, let's walk through creating different payloads. First, let's take a look at the help menus on MSFvenom so that you have a better understanding of the capabilities of it. Our first command is going to be MSFvenom-H. As expected, the help file provides you with some guidance to better understand the flags available, the syntax, and then how to find out more about the program. So let's type MSFvenom-L format and see what comes up. So there's two different types of categories. We're looking at the first one now. The first category are the different types of executables that we can create. So notice that there's an exe, an MSI, and PSH for Windows. Also, ELF files will create a Linux executable. So let's scroll down a little bit. And we see that there's another framework called Framework Transform Formats. So the transform formats are a different type of code that you can generate. So if you want to add the payload into your own code, then you would select the appropriate transform format. You can see that there's a variety of different options available. So let's take a look at the payloads available. This is actually a really large list. There's over 900 payloads, so we're going to take a look at a subset of those, just specifically around the meterpreter on the target system. So I'm going to type in the command MSFvenom-L payloads, and then I'm going to look for meterpreter and see what comes up. So as we scroll down, we can see multiple architectures. So again, there's pretty much a payload for every architecture out there. Here's a better list of platforms that we can target. So let's just do MSFvenom-L platforms, and then again, we're going to be presented with a large number of choices. If we scroll up, we can see obviously there's Windows, there's Linux, there's Cisco, etc. Again, lots of choices. The last list command I want to run is to see a list of encoders. Again, we won't be covering that topic in this video since obfuscation and virus scanning avoidance actually deserves its own tutorial. But here's a list regardless, so let's just type in MSFvenom-L encoders and see what we get. So you can see here they give the name of the different types of encoders that are available, a description, and then they rank them from excellent to low. Now that we've explored the help menu a bit, let's actually create some code. I want to start out by producing some code we can place in a program that we create. Remember, this is the transform format. So let's take a look at the command. So I'm going to use MSFvenom-P, and then I'm going to select the Linux x86 meterpreter reverse TCP payload. The local host, the Kali system I'm on, is 10.0.2.7, and I selected the local port for listening as 4444. -F is bash, so we're going to get bash code, and then we're going to export it to reverse_tcp.sh. So let's go ahead and run the command. Okay, so it's done. It gives us some information about the final product, and so let's actually take a look at it. So let's open the file. And we can see that it has a lot of information in here, and that is actually our actual code to create that reverse shell and push meterpreter onto that system. We can now use that bash shell program, massage the code so that it actually runs, and in theory, it will create a reverse shell connection from the victim to our Kali box and create a meterpreter session for us. So next, let's create a Windows exploit. All right, so now we have the command to create a Windows payload. And if you look at the command MSFvenom-P, we selected the Windows Meterpreter Reverse TCP payload. Again, the L host is the same, L port, sure, it can be the same. The -F, we're choosing exe, so it'll create an executable, and then we're going to create a file called reverse_tcp.exe. So you can see that it didn't take too long to actually generate the payload. And just like that, we actually have an executable file called reverse_tcp.exe ready to test. So I don't have a Windows system in my lab, so I'm just going to have to take it on blind faith that it works, which is pretty much how this goes anyway when we're running physical or social engineering penetration tests. To be fully transparent and rain on your parade a little bit, there's been many times when I was on a physical pen test and our attempt to install payloads on systems just simply failed. A quick tip to keep your sanity in this field is to get used to the failure when it comes to deploying payloads generated by MSFvenom. To be clear, it was not the fault of MSFvenom, it was simply because of security implementations on the victim systems or unexpected architectures. It's actually pretty difficult to generate new payloads while you're actually in the middle of a physical penetration test. I've done it, it's chaos, and it's certainly not easy. So back to the examples. Sometimes the best way to deliver a payload is to hide it within something that's seemingly benign. So we're going to embed a payload into a PDF file. The command changes are actually very slight. In fact, we're running the exact same command. We're just changing the file name. So let's go ahead and execute. So in reality, this malicious.pdf file is exactly the same file as the executable we created earlier. It's just that we have a .pdf at the end of it. I wanted to show you this example so that you understand that we're not really necessarily trying to create a PDF file. We're just creating a file that says it's a PDF file. And this is the type of payload that we would send during a social engineering attack. But to be transparent again, the success rate of a payload embedded in a PDF document is actually really low, especially for larger enterprises who actually expect this type of attack and implement zero trust security. As mentioned before, when we're using MSFvenom, we don't have a way to deliver the payload across network protocols. So there are some issues that we need to discuss. There has to be a communication path from the victim system to our listener. If we set up a server on the internet as a listener, the victim system has to be able to connect back to that listener. And in large enterprises, security operations centers actually constantly monitor for weird behavior. And a payload that opens a port, connects to an outside server, might actually fit that description of weird behavior depending on the security of the organization. In addition, network security teams on large enterprises may simply just prohibit outbound traffic entirely, meaning the victim system may try to connect to our listener on the internet, but it will just end up being blocked before ever leaving the enterprise network. That's why creating a payload with MSFvenom requires a lot of pre-planning and work with the client to make sure that we aren't wasting their time and their money on a poorly planned penetration test engagement. So I think it's vital to reiterate the ethical side of hacking again. The skills you learn are incredibly powerful and should only be used to protect and secure systems, not to necessarily just exploit them. The goal of a professional penetration test is to evaluate the security of an organization's networking environment and validate existing security measures. Always remember that hacking without permission is illegal. So make sure that you have explicit consent in writing before conducting any penetration test, and then constantly maintain communication with your clients during that engagement. And in fact, my suggestion is to over-communicate. If you found this video helpful, please make sure to subscribe for more tutorials just like this one. If you have any questions, please make sure that you join our Discord server where we talk about all things related to professional penetration testing. Thanks for watching and happy hacking.